Sakamoto-san, thank you very much for making the time to join us today. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time.
Thank you. My pleasure. I appreciate your invitation.
So the story of the Fukuhara family is quite extraordinary. Can you give us a quick summary of the story for people who maybe haven't had a chance to read your book yet?
Sure. So it is the true story of a Japanese American family divided by war. And it is really a saga of two Japanese immigrants to the United States who have 5 American-born children. And when the patriarch passes away in Washington State, the widow takes her children back to Japan. And 2 of those 5 end up back in the US as the situation is worsening in the 1930s. And by the time of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the family is really divided geographically, and the 2 children in the US are interned. And one of those children volunteers for the United States Army out of the internment camp at Gila River in Arizona. His name is Harry, is set on a path to the Southwest Pacific, and he island hops all the while knowing that his brothers in Japan are of age to be conscripted into the Japanese military and are likely in the army. And by the summer of 1945, he's in the Philippines looking at the prospect of invading Japan. And meanwhile, his brothers in Japan are digging in the location on Kyushu that he will likely land. And everything changes with the atomic bombs. And I won't tell you what happens with a spoiler alert in Hiroshima, where dear family members are. But this is the story of tragedy and reconciliation and deep and abiding love across cultures and war.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you came to write the book?
It was really serendipity. I had moved to Japan, to Tokyo, with my Japanese husband at the time, and we had just arrived, and I was researching my dissertation. Interestingly, it was about the Japanese diplomat Sugihara Chiune, who had saved over 2,000 Polish Jews in Lithuania during World War II. And I was invited to a press conference at the Foreign Press Club. I have no idea how I got on this mailing list, but I went, and there were these former refugees who were visiting Japan for the first time since the 1940s. They had survived the war. Their loved ones in Europe had not. And this Japanese American gentleman was accompanying them. I did not know him. I did not know whether he was Japanese or American. His Japanese sounded native to me. His English sounded native as well. And he was moving very fluidly between various groups, Japanese diplomats from the foreign ministry, American press at this press conference, and these bewildered former refugees who were filled with emotion upon returning to Japan for the first time in decades. I subsequently found out that that was Harry, who is the protagonist of the book, a retired US Army colonel. And this is his family story. I met him at that event. We struck up a conversation, and in many ways, our conversation never ended or ended decades later when he passed away. And this is the book that is the result of that chance meeting.
How do you think the Fukuhara family story illustrates broader themes about the experience of Asian Pacific Americans?
It really is kind of history in a nutshell, or history through the lens of a single family. I wanted to tell various stories on multiple levels. And through this one family, you see the experience of immigration, all of that excitement and hope and despair and adjustment. You see the children who are born in the United States and are proud Americans, and how they maneuver within a family where, of course, their parents are talking about the old country, in this case, they're the motherland of Japan and the ancestral home of Hiroshima. And you look at kind of the coming of age of these American kids, balancing two languages, two cultures, their love and respect for their parents, and yet their desire to have what they viewed as a typical American lifestyle. You see the discrimination that they face, which is unjust and frequent. They're striving in peacetime and in war, the various obstacles that all immigrants and their early generations have to overcome, and the kind of success that they really create out of hard work and family and community and education and persistence and resilience and all those great qualities that we want to see in everybody who lives in any country. So in many ways, it captures that kind of intergenerational bond and struggle, and the individual struggles depending upon the generation in the United States as Asian Americans or Pacific Islanders.
Unfortunately, there's been a history of discrimination against Asian Pacific Americans, and recently an alarming rise in hate crimes targeting members of this community. What do you think we can do to address that problem?
It's so unfortunate, and the numbers are really rising. I know that there are various organizations keeping track of the spike, and it's alarming. I think, unfortunately, discrimination and prejudice followed by discrimination, are always in the air, and anybody who looks different and is regarded as the other can be a victim of it. So I think what we need, and what is happening to a great degree and needs to continue to happen, is to call it out when it happens right away. If it is a hate crime, say it. And this would be on the part of those eyewitnesses, the police who come to the scene and then prepare a case, the judicial system, the press, and organizations, both Asian American and others, and all organizations that care about social justice. I think that we need to see activists speaking up, and they are. We see a lot of influencers taking stands, and we need allies who are from all groups supporting them. And we just have to be vigilant, because unfortunately, even when episodes like these recede, and I am hopeful that over time the situation will improve, it's always possible. We can never seem to eradicate it. And unfortunately, we're living in a time with really fraught politics and people who are afraid and manifest their fear through slurs and violence. And it's a frightening time. But I think that activism and vigilance are the cures and the antidotes over time.
Working as a US diplomat, I've spent much of my career living and working in Asian countries, and I'm struck by the incredible diversity of cultures, traditions, and languages in the region. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of using such a broad category as Asian Pacific Americans.
I mean, I've always been uncomfortable as a historian with the term Asia in general. I mean, it's a term that was created or whose derivation traces back to ancient Greece, and it, originally applied to the area around Turkey, but gradually shifted eastward and has become really a catch-all term for an incredibly diverse region. I'm sure you know many of the countries that are part of Asia even better than I and many others, and have been to them. And it's a rich and dynamic region, each country and each culture and each ethnic group having its own history, and we bundle them together. So I think that that's a mistake from the West and from the United States to even sort of present them with these broad brush categories. I mean, if you choose some common values such as Confucianism, you can make a case for East Asia with China and Korea and Japan sharing some of those traditions, but there's so much variation. So I am uncomfortable with that. I think it exists. We have to live with that lumping together, but we should really respect the differences. They have had interactions, for example, with Japan. So to say Asia as just a sweeping term is to miss the texture of the history and the encounters and really the beauty of each group. But that's what we're dealing with, and we will continue to deal with it.
How has your work studying, teaching, and writing about Asian Pacific American history affected you and your own life?
I think it's really enriched my life. I mean, I'm a middle-aged white woman raised in New England, and I have to say that I never learned about, for example, the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. I didn't learn about that until much later, really, just reading sort of clips and meeting some people in college whose families had lost everything because their families were interned. And I was really horrified that I hadn't been educated in this aspect of my own nation's history. So meeting this family, studying the topics, researching and writing the book was really an attempt to correct my own gaps and my sense that others may share these gaps. I mean, now teaching about the internment, for example, and Japanese American history in the United States is taught more widely than ever before, but it's not taught everywhere. It's only in certain states. And my book happily is taught in colleges and some high schools, and there are many other fine books out there about an array of topics about Asia and Asian Americans. And I think we are living in a more diverse world and with access to more diverse sources, and that makes me happy. On a personal basis, I married a Japanese, and I have children who are Hapa or multiracial, born in Tokyo, raised there for half of their lives, and then raised in Hawaii and educated on the continent of the US. So that aspect of my family culture is very important to me. I feel that my world is larger for it, and I'm living in Honolulu now with a very large Asian American population, Native Hawaiian population, Pacific Islander population. I just feel so fortunate to be in such an interesting place with people who really care about getting along. So I feel that my life is better for these encounters, and that I'm so lucky to have met, for example, the Fukuhara family on which Midnight in Broad Daylight is based, and to have had all these encounters over time, and to have lived in Japan for 17 wonderful years. I can't imagine my life without these exchanges.
I understand you've done a lot of interviews and talks about your book. What are some of the most interesting things you've heard from people you've talked to who've read it, particularly young people? What kind of reactions do you hear?
It's so interesting to me because when you put a book out in the world, you never really know how it's going to be received. You know what you wrote, and you hope that people will connect with it, and you hope that they will understand the message on various nuanced levels. But what I have found is that people bring their own experiences to the book, and reading a book is really an active process. It's not passive at all. And their frame of reference colors how they react, and they have such insights, even more than I ever imagined. And so I learn from readers through conversations and through email, what their interaction has been like. And it's really wonderful. And it ranges from, that's my family story, whether they are Japanese American or Vietnamese American or Filipino American. This is my family story of immigration too. My family wants me to go back to their native land and study, and this is how I feel about it. That's what students will say. Or they'll say to me, I'm juggling two cultures too, and it's not easy. And sometimes I feel as if I'm neither here nor there. I'm too much of one ethnicity in one place and not enough in the other. So that's really interesting for me to hear about the universal nature of this story for anybody who's coming from another place or whose family comes from another place. I've also heard from a lot of people who, from both Japan and the United States, who say this book became a conversation starter. There were certain situations that were similar to those that happened to my family, but we could never really broach them before. One person wrote and said, my uncle was in the Japanese Navy. I know that he passed away, but I know it was very painful for the family. And this book has allowed me to have that conversation. Or somebody who writes to me about having a loved one who died in the atomic bomb, or an American soldier who writes to me and says, this reminds me of when I was sort of guarding POWs in the Mideast. And although you wrote about Harry in the Southwest Pacific, it was so reminiscent for me because I realized that the enemy is just teenage boys too. And so it's brought together many worlds, and I'm really grateful when readers write or communicate with me because I learned so much from them, and I appreciate the care with which they've read the book.
Thank you very much, Sakamoto-san. It really is an extraordinary story, and thank you for taking the time to join us to talk about the Fukuhara family and about some of the broader themes in Asian Pacific American experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Senzer. I'm delighted to meet you, and I'm so grateful to be here with you today. I wish that I were in Nagoya as well. Thank you.
Thank you.